Rain pressed softly against the skyscraper's towering windows, blurring the city lights that usually danced like dreams on the horizon. From the 45th floor, everything looked distant. The streets, the honking cars, the crowds, and even the life Emma Holden had once fought so hard to build. She stood still, clutching the envelope in her hand like it was a piece of her heart. Inside it was the truth, her resignation letter, folded with care and courage. It was time. She was leaving. For 5 years, Emma had served as the executive assistant to Dominic Westbridge, a name that echoed through business schools and Forbes articles. Billionaire, visionary, relentless. Too many. He was a man who turned struggling companies into gold. But to Emma, he was more complicated, sometimes brilliant, sometimes cruel, and always impossible to forget. Her desk was still neat, just like he liked it. Not a paper out of place, not a smudge on the glass. Emma had learned his preferences better than her own over the years. His schedule, his moods, the exact temperature he liked his coffee. She could predict his day down to the minute, but she hadn't predicted this moment. She reached into her drawer and carefully placed the envelope on top, her fingers lingering as if second-guessing. A part of her still hesitated, not because she didn't want to go, but because deep down, she feared he wouldn't care, that she could leave after 5 years and he wouldn't even flinch, that her presence, the woman who arrived before sunrise and stayed until the lights turned off, would be forgotten in a single breath. Then the elevator dinged. Emma stepped back quickly, her heart thudding in a way it hadn't in months. Dominic Westbridge was early. He was never early. She instinctively wiped her palms on her skirt and straightened her blouse. Old habits, hard to kill. He walked in, his presence filling the office like thunder. Black coat dripping from the rain, jaw clenched, phone to his ear. His voice was sharp, commanding. Tell them I'm not shifting the deadline. If they want the contract, they'll deliver by Friday. He ended the call, tossing the phone onto the leather couch behind him. His eyes landed on Emma. She couldn't read him like usual. Not today. You're early, she said, voice even. So are you, he replied. Didn't expect to see you here this late. It's Friday. I had a few things to finish. Her hands clasped tightly in front of her, hiding the tremor. He walked past her toward his office, then stopped suddenly, turning around. Did you do the final revision on the Tesla merger file? She nodded. On your desk. He looked at her a moment longer than necessary. You okay? Emma blinked. That question, so simple, but coming from him, felt unreal. Yes. He looked unconvinced, but didn't press further. Instead, he turned, walking into his glass office. Emma exhaled slowly. This was the moment. If she didn't place the letter now, she never would. She moved quickly to his desk and placed the envelope at the center. Then she stepped back, took one last look around the office, where she'd spent over 1,000 days, and turned to leave. Her heels clicked gently against the marble floor, the sound oddly final. She reached the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. But before the doors could open, she heard it, his voice, firm, unshaken, not loud, but enough to make her turn. Emma. She turned around slowly. Dominic was standing by his door, holding the envelope. You quit? He asked, lifting it slightly. His face was unreadable. There was no anger, no surprise, just quiet intensity. She swallowed hard. Yes, effective immediately. I'm sorry for the short notice. He nodded once. Then, after a long pause, he said something that froze her in place. Before you go, I need one last thing from you. Her breath caught. What is it? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward her with quiet purpose, each step deliberate, slow. When he finally stood in front of her, he didn't speak like a boss giving an order. His voice was lower, almost vulnerable. I need to know why. Emma blinked, stunned. Why? He nodded. Why now? After everything? After all this time? She hesitated. Because I forgot who I was working for. And somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was. Dominic's jaw tightened. You think I didn't see that? Maybe. Or maybe you saw it and didn't care. Silence stretched between them like a rope pulled tight. Then, gently, he said, You're wrong. Emma's throat tightened. Come. Back in, he said softly. Just 10 minutes. No job titles, no schedules, no rules. She looked at the elevator, then back at him. I already said goodbye. Dominic shook his head. You said it on paper. I want to hear it from your heart. And just like that, the storm outside no longer mattered, because the real storm was now inside her. The elevator dinged again. Doors opened. But Emma didn't move. Not forward, not back. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't leaving. It's knowing whether to turn around. And listen, Emma stepped back into the office slowly, the soft glow from the hallway lights wrapping around her like the warmth of a place she thought she'd already left behind. She wasn't sure why she listened. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was closure, or maybe, just maybe, it was something she hadn't been ready to admit to herself. Dominic closed the glass door behind them and walked over to the long conference table that had hosted board meetings, investor pitches, and countless late-night strategy sessions. But now it was silent. No laptops, no notepads. Just space between two people who had spent years working side by side, and yet somehow never really said what mattered. He gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then slowly took the seat across from him. For a moment, they didn't speak. The quiet settled over them like dust. I know I've been difficult, he began, his eyes not quite meeting hers. Emma gave a soft, humorless laugh. That's one word for it. He cracked a slight smile, the kind he rarely gave unless a deal closed or a competitor folded. Fair enough. She folded, her hands in her lap, watching him closely. So what is this really about? Why ask me to come back in? He leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced. Because I owe you more than a silent goodbye. And because I think you leaving says more about me than it does about you. Her brow furrowed. I pushed everyone away, Emma. Friends, family, even the board avoids me unless it's numbers. But you stayed. All this time, you stayed. And I took that for granted. Emma blinked. She hadn't expected honesty from him. Not like this. You didn't just run my calendar. He continued. You ran my life. You knew what I needed before. I did. And the truth is, I never thanked you. Not once. She looked down, overwhelmed by the rare vulnerability in his voice. I didn't stay for a thank you. I stayed because I believed in what we were building. Dominic's voice was softer now. And what about now? Don't you believe anymore? I believe in me, she said. For the first time in years, I got an offer, Dominic. Somewhere else. Somewhere that sees me as more than the person who holds a clipboard and smiles through chaos. He nodded, slowly. London. Her eyes widened. How did you? I saw the recruiter's name in your inbox last month. I didn't read the email, just saw enough to know you were thinking about leaving. And I told myself I'd deal with it later. But I never did. Emma stared at him. You knew, and you didn't say anything. I was afraid. Afraid that, if I asked why you were leaving, you'd actually tell me. And I wasn't sure I could take the answer. She couldn't respond. There were too many words tangled inside her chest. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. White, sealed, unlabeled. I wasn't going to give you this, he said quietly. But it's yours. She hesitated, then reached across the table and took it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she broke the seal and unfolded the paper. It was a letter. A recommendation. Written by Dominic himself. To whom it may concern. Miss Emma Holden is the most capable, strategic, and fiercely loyal professional I've ever worked with. She has not only been the foundation of my success, but the reason much of it even exists. Any company would be lucky to have her. But beyond her skills, what sets her apart is the quiet strength she carries every day. She's the reason our office runs, the reason I kept going, even when I wanted to stop. I may have built an empire, but she kept it standing. Emma's throat tightened. She looked up at him, blinking back emotion. You wrote this. He nodded. A month ago. Why? Didn't you give it to me then? Because I didn't want to help you leave, he said, voice barely above a whisper. But I knew you deserved better than silence. Emma held the letter in her lap, her heart pounding. He leaned back in his chair. I didn't call you back here to convince you to stay, Emma. I called you back because I needed you to know that you mattered, not just to this company, But to me, her breath caught. "Dominic," he raised a hand gently. "You don't have to say anything. But before you go, I had to tell you the truth, not as your boss, as someone who doesn't want to wonder every day what could have been if I had just said something real." She looked down at the letter again, the ink slightly smudged from the dampness of her fingers. "I thought you never noticed me," she said finally. "I noticed everything," he said. "I just didn't know how to show it." A heavy silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was full of words unspoken, memories shared, and moments neither of them could undo. Emma finally stood. "I still have a flight to catch," she said. That Dominic stood too. "I know." She walked toward the door, then paused and turned. "Thank you for the letter." He gave a soft nod. "And thank you for everything." As she reached the elevator again, Dominic's voice stopped her one more time. "If I had one more chance, not as your employer, but as someone who cares about you, would you let me fight for you?" She didn't answer right away, because some questions are too big for words. She just looked at him, long enough for him to see that maybe her story wasn't finished yet. And as the elevator doors closed between them, he whispered something she couldn't hear. But her heart did. The taxi pulled away from the curb, but Emma didn't look back. She stared straight ahead, her hands resting in her lap as the city moved past her in streaks of light and color. Her suitcase sat beside her, untouched, unopened like her future. London was waiting. A new title, a new team, a new identity. Everything she'd ever said she wanted. So why did her chest ache like she was leaving something unfinished behind? Her fingers traced the edge of the envelope Dominic had given her. The letter was tucked inside her coat pocket now, warm against her side like a secret too fragile to hold and too important to let go. She read it again during the ride. Every word, twice. Not because she doubted it, but because part of her needed to believe he truly meant it. She had spent 5 years watching Dominic Westbridge make deals worth billions, without blinking. But tonight, for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that no press conference or interview had ever revealed. Fear, not of failure, but of loss, and she didn't know how to process that. The car stopped in front of her apartment building, and the driver reached for her bag. But she waved him off gently. "I've got it," she whispered. The rain had softened into mist, and, as she stepped out, it kissed her skin like the city's quiet goodbye. She climbed the stairs slowly, unlocked her door, and dropped her keys into the small dish by the front table. Everything inside looked the same: couch, books, half-packed, boxes, but it felt different, like a space suspended between what was and what might be. She changed into soft clothes, made tea she didn't drink, and sat on the edge of her bed staring at her passport. 3 weeks. That was all she had before she would be in a different country, a different world. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something told her to answer. She did. "Emma." The voice was unmistakable. "Dominic," she said, caught between surprise and disbelief. "I know I shouldn't be calling," he said quickly, "but I needed to ask you something." She closed her eyes. "You already said everything." "No, not everything. Not this." There was silence on the line for a moment. "Then, if I asked you to meet me somewhere tomorrow morning just for a conversation, would you come?" She didn't reply immediately. "Not to change your mind," he added. "Not to keep you from leaving. Just to show you something I should have shown you a long time ago." Emma hesitated, heart pounding against her ribs. "Where?" He let out a breath like he hadn't expected her to say yes. "There's a diner on 8th and Carlisle. 7 a.m. booth in the back." Emma sat in the quiet of her apartment for a long time after the call ended. She wasn't sure what this was: closure, curiosity, or the final thread tying her to a life she thought she was done with. She didn't sleep that night. Not really. The next morning, she walked into the diner exactly at 7. The bell above the door chimed, and the smell of coffee and pancakes wrapped around her like a memory. She spotted him instantly. Dominic, sitting in the far booth, wearing a gray hoodie instead of his usual suit, hands wrapped around a coffee mug like he was trying to ground himself in something real. He stood when he saw her, a little too quickly. She slid into the seat across from him. "You look human," she said softly. Surprised by the informality, he smiled. I figured if I wanted to have a real conversation, I should stop dressing like a boardroom. Emma looked around. You used to bring files here. I remember. You hated the coffee, but loved the silence. I still hate the coffee, he said with a grin. Then he reached into a leather folder and slid something across the table. She looked down. A document. Title, Project E. She furrowed her brows. What is this? An idea, he said. A platform. A global initiative. Something I've been working on quietly for a year. I haven't shown it to anyone. Not the board. Not my investors. Only you. Emma opened the file. It was a blueprint for a non-profit wing of Westbridge Holdings Technology for Underserved Communities, mentoring programs for youth in emerging markets, sustainability-driven startup support in underdeveloped countries. It was bold, audacious, beautiful. You're building this, she asked, stunned. I want to, he said. But I can't do it alone. And I didn't want to launch it without the right person beside me. Someone who actually understands the purpose, not just the profit. Her heart pounded. Why me? Dominic looked at her like the answer was the most obvious thing in the world. Because you've always believed in more than just what we do. You cared about why we did it. And because I trust you, not just with this, but with everything. Emma didn't speak, couldn't. Her mind was spinning. I told you yesterday I didn't want to fight for you, he said gently. I lied, I do. But I know it has to be your choice. She stared at the papers, then at him. If I say no, she whispered. He nodded. Then I'll still launch it. But it'll always be missing its heart. Tears pressed at her eyes uninvited. She blinked quickly. I don't want to stop you from going to London, he added. If that's your dream, I'll buy your ticket myself. But if you stay, it won't be as my assistant. She looked up, startled. I want you as co-founder, he said. Partner, equal. The diner buzzed with the clatter of dishes and conversation. But all Emma could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat and one sentence echoing louder than the rest. Before you go, I need one last thing from you. She finally understood what that one last thing was. That not her time, not her loyalty, not her skills, her belief. And this time, he was willing to earn it. Asterisk. She didn't answer right away. Dominic's offer hung in the air between them like a spark that hadn't found fire yet. The word co-founder repeated in her mind like an echo she couldn't quiet. For 5 years, she'd been the one behind the scenes, organizing, fixing, protecting, never in the spotlight, never called equal. And now here he was offering not just a title, but a purpose. Something she could build, something she could believe in. Emma closed the folder gently. You've really been working on this for a year. He nodded. Started the night after that gala. Remember when I disappeared for a week without notice? She smirked. Of course I remember. I had to rearrange 6 meetings and calm 3 board members. Well, that week, I went to Sierra Leone. One of our suppliers there folded without warning. I was ready to cut losses. But when I got there, I met a 12-year-old girl using an old laptop to teach herself code. Because the school had no teachers left, that's when it hit me. We've been building walls when we could have been building bridges. Emma stared at him, stunned. I've spent most of my life making money, he said. But that girl, she made me realize I haven't made enough impact. He leaned forward. I don't need another investor, Emma. I need someone who knows how to keep a vision alive when it's on life support. Someone who fights quietly, the way you always have. And yeah, I need someone who keeps me grounded when I'm tempted to turn everything into numbers. Emma looked away for a moment, her heart aching in the best and worst way. He saw her now, not as an assistant, not as a cog in his machine, but as someone who could dream too. I have to be honest, she said, voice low. London wasn't just about ambition. It was about escape. His eyes softened. I didn't feel seen here. Dominic, I felt used. Like a reliable machine with no voice, and I let it go on too long. That's on me. He looked genuinely pained. I never wanted you to feel that way, I know, she said. But I did. They sat in silence again. Not out of awkwardness, but out of reflection. Outside, the city moved like a heartbeat, constant, indifferent, alive. Then she said something that surprised them both. If I were to stay, it can't be temporary. I won't be your plan B. I won't be a second thought when something goes wrong. Dominic looked directly at her. I don't want you as a backup plan. I want you at the start. You'd be in every meeting, every pitch, every decision. The voice beside mine, or louder than mine, if it needs to be. She raised an eyebrow. You sure your ego can handle that? He gave a rare, honest laugh. We'll find out. Emma smiled, but it faded quickly. I still don't know what the right choice is. Dominic leaned back. I don't expect you to decide now, but I needed you to know that staying doesn't mean going back to what it was. This is a door, a new one. You walk through it, and we build something that matters. She nodded slowly. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. When they stood to leave, he walked her outside. The sun was finally breaking through the gray morning, lighting the wet pavement like gold. It was quiet for a moment before she spoke again. You could have just let me go. He nodded. I know. So why didn't you? He hesitated. Then he said, simply because I've let too many good things go already. That night, Emma sat by her window. Folder open again, the city stretching out beneath her like a canvas waiting for paint. She ran her fingers over the corner of the document, Project E, and thought about that girl in Sierra Leone. She thought about the hundreds, maybe thousands like her, kids who were born brilliant but buried by lack. And she thought about the one man who had everything and was finally ready to use it for something that mattered. The next morning, her flight was scheduled for 10 a.m. The suitcase was packed, passport ready, cab waiting, but Emma sat at her kitchen table, the folder still open in front of her. She picked up her phone, and she sent one message. It didn't say yes. It didn't say no. It simply said, meet me where this all began. If you still mean it, bring the pen. Asterisk. The rooftop was just as she remembered. Quiet, isolated, unspoken. When she first came up here, it was 4 years ago, her third week on the job. Overwhelmed by deadlines, unfamiliar names, and the cold rush of the corporate world, Emma had escaped to the top of the building one lunch break and cried behind the giant HVAC unit. Unseen by the world below. He found her that day. Not because he was looking for her, but because, in his words, he couldn't find quiet anywhere else either. Back then, he sat beside her in silence and offered a granola bar. Not words, not advice, just silence and company. And now, 4 years later, she was standing there again, watching the city yawn beneath the morning sun, waiting for the one man who could change everything or let it go. The door behind her creaked open. Dominic stepped out, not in a tailored suit, not carrying a phone or tablet, just him, in jeans and a soft sweater, holding nothing but a black pen in one hand. He looked around and smiled faintly. You really picked the place where this all started. Emma turned. It's the only place I could remember ever breathing while working for you. He didn't argue. He stepped forward and extended the pen to her. No assumptions, no pressure. I brought it, but I didn't sign anything yet. She glanced down at the small folder under her arm. Neither did I. Dominic exhaled deeply, something between a sigh and surrender. Emma, I've built entire companies faster than I've built trust with people. But with you, it was different. You didn't just see numbers, you saw people. You saw me, even when I was too proud or blind to see myself. I stayed because I thought someday that would matter. She whispered, but I didn't know when. It matters now, he said. It matters more than ever. He sat down on the bench, motioning to the space beside him. She joined him without hesitation, her fingers tightening around the folder. I thought about London, she began. About who I'd be there. No past, no baggage. Just a new beginning. It sounded freeing. It still could be, he said. But I realized something last night, she continued. I don't just want a new beginning, I want to rewrite what I should have started a long time ago. I don't want to leave just to prove I can. I want to stay if I believe it will be different. Dominic's eyes didn't leave hers. And do you? I want to, she said honestly. But it depends on who I'm standing next to. He leaned closer, voice quiet but steady. Then let me show you. Not with promises, with action, with purpose, with Project E and everything. That comes next. She opened the folder slowly, laid the document flat on the bench between them. The words stared up at her. Project E, Co-founder partnership. Her name was already printed on the second line. She reached for the pen, then paused. You. No, this doesn't mean I forgive everything, she said. He nodded. It means you're giving me a chance to earn it. She signed. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was a beginning, and when she handed the pen back to him, he didn't smile in triumph. He breathed like a man finally believing he wasn't building something alone. They sat there a while longer, letting the wind comb through the silence. Then Emma turned to him. There's one condition. Anything, he replied. You don't get to pretend I'm invisible anymore. Not in meetings, not in memos, not in life. Dominic looked at her, gaze unwavering. Emma, if this works the way I hope it does, people won't just see you. He paused. They'll follow you. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a supporting act in someone else's story. She felt like the beginning of her own. 6 months later, the office looked nothing like it used to. The walls of floor 45 had been stripped of their stiff gray art and replaced with images of children in classrooms around the world. Laughter, learning, light, each photo taken by someone within the company, sent from places where Project E was already making a difference. The once sterile space now pulsed with energy and life. There were new voices, new ideas, and most importantly, a new heartbeat. And in the center of it all stood Emma Holden, no longer the assistant shadowing behind schedules and sharp emails. Now, she stood tall, co-founder, strategist, visionary. Her name appeared beside Dominic's in press releases, in interviews, and most importantly, in the quiet conversations around coffee cups and whiteboards where dreams began to shape real solutions. She was different now, not because she changed her voice or walked with more force, but because she finally believed she belonged. On this particular morning, the office buzzed with anticipation. Dominic was scheduled to speak at the annual Tech for Change Summit, a massive platform filled with leaders and thinkers from around the globe. And though he'd spoken at many before, today's was different. Today's keynote wasn't about revenue growth or acquisition trends. It was about heart. About purpose, and about a girl who once left her resignation letter on his desk and walked away. Emma stood at the back of the conference hall, watching the lights dim. A single spotlight fell on the stage. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. Please welcome the founder of Westbridge Holdings and co-founder of Project E, Dominic Westbridge. Polite applause followed as he walked onto the stage, poised as always, but with a different weight to his steps, not pressure, conviction. He reached the podium and looked out over the sea of faces. Then his eyes found hers, standing far in the back, and for a moment, the whole room disappeared. He began speaking, but not from a script. I built a company from scratch. I built wealth, influence, a reputation, but none of it taught me how to be human. That came later, from someone who wasn't trying to impress me or outshine me. She was just trying to remind me that people matter. There was a murmur in the crowd. I want to tell you about a woman who made me listen, who challenged me, who believed I could do more than when I could actually give. She's the reason Project E exists. She's the reason I'm here speaking to you about purpose instead of just profit. He paused. And she's the reason I finally understand what it means to build something that outlives you. The room went silent. Emma stood frozen, not because he was talking about her, but because for the first time in her life, someone was speaking the truth of her story out loud in front of the world, without taking a single thing from her. When the applause erupted, it wasn't for a company. It was for a mission built not by one powerful man but by two people who met on a rooftop, beneath exhaustion and ambition, and decided to start again. After the event, Emma walked slowly down the side corridor toward the stage exit. She didn't expect him to be waiting, but there he was, leaning against the wall, sleeves rolled up, a quiet smile on his face, no fanfare, no camera. Just the same man who once asked her for one last thing. You didn't have to say all that. She said softly, I did. He replied, and I meant every word. She stepped closer. When I almost boarded that plane, I wasn't running away from you. I was running from the part of me I thought no one noticed. And now she looked up at him, steady and calm. Now I realize I never needed permission to be seen. I just needed to stop hiding. Dominic nodded. You were never invisible, Emma. I just didn't know how to see beyond what I expected from people. She looked around the hallway, then back at him. So, what happens next? He smiled gently. Next, we change the world, and we do it together. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. That sounds impossible. That's what you said the day you asked for a weekend off, remember? She laughed louder now, warmth blooming in her chest. They walked together back toward the lobby, where dozens of young entrepreneurs and leaders waited, eager to pitch, to learn, to connect dot. And as the elevator doors opened and they stepped inside, Emma turned to him once more. You never told me. What would have happened if I didn't come to the diner that day? Dominic tilted his head, a quiet seriousness returning to his eyes. I would have shown up at the airport, really? With coffee in a folder and maybe a boarding pass to London, just to sit beside you one last time. Emma's chest swelled. You would have flown across the ocean for me. He nodded. I would have crossed more than that. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Some answers live in silence. And as the elevator ascended, as the city climbed around them, Emma realized this wasn't the end of a story. It was only the beginning of something real, something earned, and something no resignation letter could ever undo.